Thank you so much to all of you for coming out today. Thank you to the Board of Trade for continuing to host us at Metro Vancouver so that we can have this conversation about the importance of Metro Vancouver to this region. I do want to just take a second to also acknowledge a couple of other colleagues that are here. Councillor Craig Hodge from Coquitlam, Councillor Raymond Louie and Vice Chair of Metro Vancouver is here. Diana Dilworth from Port Moody is here. So thank you so much for being here as well. So really what I want to talk about, actually, it's almost like Robin and I shared notes, is about collaboration and about bringing this region together and how we need to do that to tackle really tough issues facing us. I think over the last, the time that I've been here at Metro, that's one of the things that I've worked really hard on, and I think our board has worked really hard on, is setting the table for conversations, for discussions. As awkward as it might be to have certain people sitting across the table from you, it's better that they're sitting across the table and you're having that conversation going forward. So when we think about what makes regional prosperity in this region, there's lots of aspects to it, but we also think that housing and drinking water, wastewater, air quality, all of those things that we kind of frankly take for granted in this region shouldn't be. And those are the things that we do at Metro Vancouver to ensure that we have this collaborative process, this region that frankly everybody in the world really wants to move to. So if you look back over the decades, in 1914, Metro Vancouver, our sewage and drainage district was established. This is the history that we have here at Metro Vancouver of working together. We had visionary community leaders that came together to say that we can do this collaboratively better than doing it ourselves. And that we had Vancouver, South Vancouver, Point Grey, and Burnaby in that initial group come together. And then over time, Coquitlam joined in 1956, and now we see the sewage and drainage district that we have today. Water, we have our own water district here in Metro Vancouver, which started in 1924. We started the Greater Vancouver Regional District, so collaboration on all of these other topics in 1967. And then in 1974, we started our Housing Corporation. So you can see that there is a long history here of working together collaboratively as a region. But much more, we do much more now than providing just utilities to this region. For example, we play a critical role in the regional planning function that provides a common vision for regional growth around this region and our regional growth strategy, Metro 2040, that was unanimously adopted. We also coordinate, we're really proud about how we work with other sectors. I'm really appreciative that TransLink's here today. The chair and the CEO is here today because we work together. When we came forward a few years ago when we were challenged by the provincial government to create a 10-year plan for transit and transportation in this region, we rolled up our sleeves, and in three and a half months, we came together, not just as elected local government elected officials bringing that together, but we got together with the boards of trades, we got together with other associations, with universities, and we brought all of that collaboration around the table. And I know Richard Walton, sorry you didn't get introduced, Richard Walton was here, who was chair of TransLink at the time. We rolled up our sleeves to engage as many people as we could in that, and I think it was a phenomenal exercise of coming together. I think that was almost one of the tipping points in this region to show that you could have all of the, I think what was interesting about it was a lot of the people that were sitting around that table were battling over the provincial election a year before that or so, but now they're sitting around the same table working for a common purpose. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do more of in this region. So we also, at Metro Vancouver, we have one of the largest regional parks systems in Canada. We're very blessed to have 22 regional parks, 2 ecological conservatories, and 3 reserves, 5 greenways, totaling 13,600 hectares of protected space within this region. In 2017, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of the park system here in Metro Vancouver. We had just about 12 million people visit all of our parks that year. In 2016, we added the Surrey Bend Regional Park, which is a 374-hectare park to our system. We added the Grouse Mountain Regional Park in 2017, which is another 74 hectares, and most people will know that because of the grouse grind. But that's one of those assets that not only helps with tourism, but helps with people getting out and away from their devices and into nature. So Metro Vancouver is also one of the largest providers in housing in this region. Most people don't know this, but under the Housing Corporation and led by Mike Clay, we have 49 affordable housing sites in Metro Vancouver in 11 municipalities where we provide low-end and subsidized rental housing to approximately 9,400 people in this region. Over the last couple of years, as Metro Vancouver, like I said earlier, we've owned the Housing Corporation for some time. We decided that it was really important that we play a bigger role in providing non-market housing in this region. So what we did as a board, we revamped everything of how we did our housing from an organizational perspective. We looked after the current product we have, but we also said we got to redevelop some of our current sites because we have some great sites that are really low density. And so we have a development going on in Vancouver. We have 2 other communities where we're in the planning stages right now for redevelopment. We partnered for the first time with a nonprofit society on a piece of land that Metro Vancouver owns in in Port Coquitlam to provide women and children housing in Port Coquitlam. And we're moving forward to try to partner with our local governments who also might have land but don't want to be a housing provider. But because we have the economies of scale and we're working together, we can come in and be that housing provider for them, and we look to be able to participate and partner with our local governments on that. One of the big discussions that we had, and it's interesting when I remember being here 6 years ago, zero waste and frankly incinerators was a really big topic, and I think there was 3 or 4 tables by the garbage industry that was here to try to pinpoint me on questions. But I'm really proud of the work that we've done at Metro Vancouver around zero waste, but also around the collaboration in other areas by setting the table. So 2011, we started the Zero Waste Conference in Metro Vancouver. We started in Burnaby. 300 or 400 people came out. We were over the moon. Now we've been holding that conference once a year. It's the biggest conference in Canada for sure, probably North America, talking about zero waste, and now we've moved into the circular economy. Out of that, in 2013, as Robin mentioned, we started the National Zero Waste Council. We thought to ourselves, solving zero waste isn't a local government issue by ourselves. We need to have the business community there. We need to have nonprofits, we need to have provincial governments there, federal governments. And so in partnership with the FCM in 2013, we started the National Zero Waste Council. I'm really proud of the work that Malcolm Brody has done on that. And today, we have 113 organizations from across this country that are participating on that council with subgroups, working papers. It is phenomenal what they've done there. In 2016, we started the Regional Economy Task Force. And so this was doing regional economic development. As many of you will know, I think it's been tried once a decade for probably the last 4 or 5 decades. Probably longer than that. I wasn't born, so I can't really remember past that. But I know in the 80s it was tried, in the 90s local government did it, and then the private sector tried, and then local government tried again, and it's never really come together. But our board said, you know what, we need to do that. We need to bring that together. So we set that as one of our top 3 priorities many years ago. Took us some time to get to it, but in 2016, we called a meeting with the boards of trade, the port, the airport, and some others, and said, hey, is there something here? And out of that, we've taken our time to get to the point that we are now because we wanted to make sure that we were doing it right. We weren't just doing it for the sake of doing it so we could tick a box on a strategic plan to say we launched something. So we've spent the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, working through what regional economic development, regional prosperity means to us here in Metro Vancouver. We've also worked in 2016, we brought together a regional homelessness task force where we brought together different players from around the region. It was chaired by Mayor Robertson and Mayor Reid from Maple Ridge with local government, but also some of our staff and other organizations on it to come out with a strategic paper on how we can actually address homelessness in Metro Vancouver. This year, we just launched with Mayor Stewart as the chair and vice chair by Robin Sylvester an industrial land strategy. I'm sure many of us have come to Robin's conversations here at the board, and there isn't a year that goes by, or probably a speech that you give, that isn't talking about the importance of industrial land in our region. We all understand it. I don't know if we all get it, but we all understand that there's a need. And so what we want to do at Metro Vancouver, or what we're going to do at Metro Vancouver, is we've set that table so that we've got, I don't know, 5 or 6 local government reps there. We've got the port, we've got the private sector, we have landowners that own large parts of industrial land, we have associations there. We think bringing all of that together will come up with the right strategy moving forward. And this year, we just kicked off our Climate 2050 strategy. Metro Vancouver had made the commitment to pursue a regional target of 80% reduction of greenhouse gases from the 2007 benchmark and get there by 2050. And now we want to work through what does that mean as a strategy. How do we bring not just our organization, which is doing quite well, and how do we do it all, not as silos, but as an overall region? How do we bring that together, and how do we guide that change and make policy and create action to actually move forward with it? So you can see that Metro Vancouver over the last number of years has really worked hard to set that table and bring diverse opinions together, but under a common purpose to move forward. Just to highlight some of the work that we're doing in our own backyard, our own organization, I talked about that we are the water, or we provide the water infrastructure for the region. We do that through managing all the North Shore and the Coquitlam Mountains. If you didn't know that, we look after those to ensure, because that's where we get our water from. We have 2 treatment facilities, the Seymour Cap and the Coquitlam facility, that is delivering clean water around the region. And in 2018, our budget for that is about $206 million. But obviously, after you use the water, you got to get rid of the water, so we look after that as well. And we have about 500 kilometers of major trunk mains around the region. We have 5 sewage treatment plants. We've got a major upgrade going on in Annacis Island. We've got an upgrade just started in Langley. And we spend this year, we'll spend about $265 million on wastewater. We're really excited about the work that we did to basically lobby the federal government, the provincial government, to get an investment in a new plant that we have to do. So this is an image of the Lionsgate sewage treatment plant. We have to move our facility. Currently, right now, it's underneath the Lionsgate Bridge. We're moving just down the road a little bit in Richards community to build this new facility. This is a $700 million project for us. We got $400 million, 212-ish from the provincial or federal government, and 192,000, something like that, 93,000 from 193 from the provincial government, so about a $400 million investment. That by far was the largest investment the provincial and federal government has ever made in Metro Vancouver as a regional district. When we rebuilt the Seymour Capilano filtration plant, that was about $700 and some odd million. We got $110 million from the provincial and federal government. So to put it in context, we've worked really hard over the last couple of years to educate people about the importance of Metro Vancouver and about the importance of investing in the infrastructure here. As I mentioned earlier, our park system, we have just over 13,600 hectares of parkland in the region. This year, we'll spend about $42 million managing that, acquiring more parkland that we try to save. And if you're ever wondering how does it all work, Metro Vancouver usually looks after the passive parks where there's the trails and the connections and all that sort of stuff. And local government, generally, we look after the active parks, the soccer fields and that sort of thing. And so that's that relationship. As I talked about earlier, solid waste is an important file of Metro Vancouver, and something I'm really proud about the work that we've done. We have about a 62% diversion rate here in Metro Vancouver, which is one of the highest in North America. And diversion rate is always an interesting conversation or an interesting topic because people will say, well, they get 90% diversion rate in Germany or these sort of things. You got to ask what they're including in their diversion rate. Most places will call their diversion rate anything that doesn't go to a garbage dump. So if it goes to a waste energy facility, if it goes to a different type of facility, as long as it doesn't, so that's how they can get their numbers so high or almost have a zero waste type economy. But for us, we conclude everything. And we want to, I think one of the things that we need to do over time is we need to celebrate with our communities about the great work that all of our residents and our businesses have done. We appreciate the policies that we have brought in, especially when it comes to not your single family home, that's pretty, or your apartment, that's pretty straightforward how to manage your organics and stuff, but in your workplace, or if you manage a large office building, or if you help manage hospitals or something like that, that's a big change that you had to go through, and we appreciate the partnership in that. This year, just as a note, we spent about $101, $102 million on our solid waste budget at Metro Vancouver, and much of that is through partnerships to run our different transfer stations and so on. So, as I talked about, for Metro Vancouver, that economies of scale that we can bring to the table really pays out, well, to our residents. So in Metro Vancouver, the average home pays $473 for all of the Metro services. And because the majority of that is on user fees, water and sewer and so on, it doesn't matter if you live in a multi-million-dollar house or you live in a $100,000, well, there probably isn't any $100,000 houses, a condo, that rate is relatively the same, because most of it, 84% of our budget is based on consumption-type user fees. And to put that in context, in the last 10 years, the Metro Vancouver annual increase has been about $9.50 a year. Right? So I'll just let that sit for a second, because I can tell you in Port Coquitlam, we're working really hard to make sure that our tax, this is a little bit of an oxymoron, our tax increase is as low as possible. But a 2 or 3% tax increase in Port Coquitlam, which, 2% is usually the average, give or take a little bit in there, but that's going to be about $75 a year. Right? So at Metro Vancouver, $9.50 a year. So I think we're really proud as a board about the economic management we've had, and I think it demonstrates the economies of scale. There is nowhere else in Canada where you're going to, on a utilities of our size, are you going to get that same value anywhere else in Canada, because you have so many municipalities not cooperating together. So in closing, I've been thinking a lot about where we are as a society, where we are as we engage in communities, where we are with the engagement online and in social media. We're living in an increasingly complex world. We need to do a better job, frankly, of working together, of figuring this out together. But there's significant change that is undermining our competitiveness. Such as the high housing costs, transit and transportation problems and challenges, and frankly, the competition for limited land. And what's required is the recognition that we're all operating in a rapidly evolving, multidimensional environment that should favor collaboration over competition, which it doesn't a lot of the time. Competition seems to outweigh collaboration when we're trying to deal with complex issues. If I hear one more group come out with, if you just do this, we'll solve the housing crisis, I don't know what I'm going to do. It just drives me up the wall, because it is not that simple. It is just, and it doesn't help the conversation to getting to a solution. And in order to move our society forward, we need to open up to people with all points of view, not just people that share our point of view. I think I'm really challenged to say this, but I think it's very true. I don't know if society trusts our governments anymore. And I think that's really sad for me, as someone that's leading government, to say that. I think that today, much of the media is looking for a sensational story. They're trying to create a villain out of some sort of public policy decision or some sort of business group taking a leadership role. I think that too many people are willing to step up and play that role as well. I don't think that is helping with our dialogue in our communities, in our region. And it turns out that it encourages these certain players to continue it, and the media loves it. The media loves playing one person against the other. They love saying it's black or white, it's right or wrong. And I don't know about you, but there are very, very few decisions that I make on a daily basis that are black or white. They're usually in some area of gray. And the more I collaborate with people, the more I'm in the gray. And that is a good thing. That's a good thing for all of us. It's a good thing for our society. But it's not a good thing if you're trying to write a media story. And the challenge that we have is that then the media publish these stories. I feel bad for the media these days. They don't have enough staff to actually do the job that we want them to do. There isn't a week that goes by that we don't see some media outlet with a half a dozen layoffs. You know, if I have to do a really tough media story, which I've done a few in the last month or so, in all of those media stories that you saw me in over the last month or so, I think I only did one interview with a TV reporter. I did every other one with a camera person. Because the TV reporter now has to be the editor, has to get some social media content out there. They can't afford the time to leave the station, so they send the TV camera person out. The funniest one that I did, I thought it was funny, the story wasn't funny, but with my phone, I dialed the reporter in the studio, I held it up on speakerphone, and that's how we did the interview, right? That's a really sad state of our media. So I think the media, not maybe on purpose, but isn't getting the story right, isn't being able to tell the complete story. And then we see what happens when that goes to social media. It blows up. And people come out. And these aren't people that are hiding behind anonymous names. There are for sure some of those. But these are people that are very bold, that are commenting on a story that isn't necessarily accurate. And it definitely doesn't tell both sides of a story. And I think this is the challenge that we're seeing not only in local government, but in provincial and federal government. There are a lot of mayors not seeking re-election in this next term. I think some of it has to do with that the type of media and social media that happens. I tell you, I think as the politicians, it wears on us a little bit, but you know, we signed up for this, so we understand it to a certain extent. But you know who it hurts the most is my wife and my daughter, because they have to read it. And it attacks them, but they don't get a voice to defend themselves. At least I get a voice to defend myself. And I think we as society, we as citizens, need to do a better job of standing up, of getting our voice out there. I think it is up to us to ensure that we're challenging some of those thoughts that are out there. Not in a negative way, not in a terrible way, but just in let's have a full conversation about this. Thank you. So I think that's an important conversation I'm having today. I will continue to have after I leave this job, because I don't need another vote, but now I can freely challenge the media in their commentary. And I will tell you, in the last month and a half, with what we went through with Metro Vancouver remuneration and other things, I can tell you that about 90% of the stories were wrong. I can tell you that we gave them the facts, because I read the emails that go to the media, so get a heads up of what they got. And I can tell you that they still didn't report on it correctly, because it was too good of a story to not tell and create a villain, me, or the Metro Board. And I think that's really sad. I think it challenges me. I think it challenges our democracy. I think that one of the challenges that we have is the media is choosing to determine their success by the number of clicks, the number of likes, the number of shares that they get on a story. We can all write a story that will get a lot of clicks. Just make it sensational. Give it a villain. Give it a black and white. But you're not going to get a lot of clicks on stories that are just telling the two sides of a story and letting us, as the reader, figure out what we think is best. So I think it's up to us to stand up, not just to the media, but also others, our friends. You don't have to do it online. Do it offline. Go for a beer with a friend and have a conversation about politics. Have a conversation about the region, about pipelines, about whatever you want, but have a conversation, because I think that's the only way that we as citizens can take back this dialogue. So on that, I want to say again thank you to Ian and the Board of Trade for allowing me as Metro Vancouver, who represents a phenomenal group of by the way, we have 40 people on our board at Metro Vancouver who work tirelessly to make this region and this organization work so well. I remind some people, I say, well, you know, at Metro we have 40 people. The BC legislature has 86, so we're about half the size. And I would suggest that, you know, we actually get along and we actually work together and we have respectful debates about what's going on there. Fair enough, we don't have party politics at Metro, but we definitely have differing ideologies, but I'm really proud of the work that my colleagues do to leave those at the door, leave their city hats at the door, and think regionally when they get there. And finally, the last thing I want to say is thanks to our amazing staff at Metro Vancouver. Many of them are here. The passion that they have for this region, for our organization, is nothing I've ever seen before. It is absolutely phenomenal about the hard work that they do on behalf of all of us to make sure that when you turn on that tap, you flush that toilet, you breathe the air, you go to a park, that it's good. It's a great experience. So I'm very thankful and blessed to have such a great staff there. So thank you so much again for having me.
Greg, thank you for taking the time to answer our follow-up questions. I'm sure there are many, and I will be keeping my eyes on Slido, so please do submit your questions and vote them up so they appear on the screen. You ended your keynote talking about remuneration. So why don't we start there? I have to. You said 90% of the media stories were not accurate. There's a lot of controversy around this. I want to give you the opportunity then to clarify and tell us the right, truthful story to this issue.
Sure, thank you. And when I was talking about the media doing a bad story, I wasn't talking about you. So the original story came out, it was a pension, it was snuck through on a Friday afternoon, it was the last item on the agenda. None of that's true. It wasn't the last item on the agenda, it was about in the middle of an agenda. It wasn't done on a Friday afternoon, it was done on a Friday morning, but Metro Vancouver meets on Fridays. Our schedule is published in December, and so that was a regular 3-hour board meeting. And there was two parts to it. So the federal government has made a change to the taxation laws, and that elected officials, specifically local government, but it does affect MLAs as well in some of their filings, that we up until the end of this year get a 15% of our wage is tax-free. And so what we did, what we wanted to do, and what we've done in many municipalities across this country, because it's not just a BC thing, has adjusted the wage so that the take-home pay, what you see in the bottom right-hand corner, was going to be the same. So obviously had to increase the gross to get to the net. So that's what we did on behalf of it. The other part was around the, we called it a retirement allowance, and it was a one-time fee or a payout when you left politics from Metro Vancouver. And so at the end of your term, you would get 10.2% of your salary, or you wouldn't have salary, I get a salary, but your remuneration at Metro Vancouver. So when you look at on average of what an average director at Metro Vancouver makes, they make about $11,000 a year. So we were talking about $1,100, $1,200 a year remuneration, sort of one-time payout. So if you're there for 10 years, we're talking about 11 grand. So, you know, being on the front page of the news. Now, I got more. Straight up, I get paid $86,000 to be the chair of Metro Vancouver. So, and I haven't done that for the 10 years that I've been there. So mine was going to be, I think, $55,000. But when I'm on the front page of the Vancouver province saying golden handshake, I'm not sure if $50,000 one-time payout is golden handshake. A firefighter in any of our communities will make that much in retirement every single year for the rest of their life. So will every city employee. So will every nurse, everybody that's a government worker in any sector. This was one time. So I think maybe where we messed up the most, to be straight up, is I think backdating it 10 years, I think is really where it rubbed most people the wrong way. And the thinking behind that was, well, if it's good for people coming in, why isn't it good enough for people that have served that time here? They've put in the same, well, maybe more time, and maybe they should be compensated when they leave office, whether that's to transition back into their career or they're actually retiring.
It was defended, defeated. Have your thoughts on this issue since changed?
No. I think that we need to have this conversation. I don't think local government officials are paid enough. There's no pension. Some of us have brought in our local governments a transition allowance. But if you don't have that, what is encouraging anybody to run for local government and leave a mid-career to go back and then have to, maybe serve 2 terms, 8 years, and then have to transition back, right? So the election's on October 20th. My last paycheck is October 31st, right? I've got a mortgage. I have a family. Every once in a while, you're going to stumble across, I would suggest, good people that will take time out in the middle of their career to do that. But we have one mayor that if he decides to go back to his previous job, he was a paramedic, he's got to go through training again, he's all on his own dime, all this sort of stuff to get back to his career. We wouldn't expect that out of anyone else. The other final thing on that, well, maybe not the final, but the final thing I'll say is, as a local government elected individual, we aren't under the Employment Standard Act. So I can't apply for EI. I can't, all of you are business people here. When you probably got into your job, you probably negotiated your compensation before you got there, or you asked for raises along the way or something like that. And if you get terminated without cause, you're going to negotiate your termination, right? If you get terminated with cause, you're still going to get EI and all that sort of. I don't get any of that as local government. Whether I get not reelected or reelected, I get terminated and no transition. So I think it's an important, and what we were trying to do at Metro Vancouver, because we didn't think that it was this golden handshake, but we thought that if we brought this forward, we would elevate, which we did successfully, the conversation about remuneration. Maybe not the path we were thinking, but we did get that part right, and I think it's a very important conversation going forward.
So you're retiring from municipal politics, but not retiring. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Too young.
Too young. That's good. Now, you mentioned elections sort of on that theme in the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade's recent economic scorecard. They paid special focus on the idea of regional governance and cooperation. And one of the ideas put forward was directly electing Metro Vancouver board members. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a terrible idea. Our federation relies on the linkage between our communities and the board. If the board was making decisions that weren't in line with what we were doing in our local governments, you would just have this really bad level of politics that would be fighting with each other. They'd probably be fighting with other levels of government, which we do sometimes. But that linkage between what happens in Port Coquitlam and because Metro Vancouver, in some cases, doesn't have the ability to pass bylaws in Port Coquitlam, but we need the bylaws passed to promote the policy that we brought in. So I'll just use water restrictions as an example. So we create the water strategy at Metro Vancouver, stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, all that sort of stuff. But it's up to the city of Port Coquitlam to implement that water strategy. And if it was a different elected body, I, as the mayor of Port Coquitlam, might go, I completely disagree with your water strategy at Metro Vancouver. I'm not implementing my own thing. I'm going to do my own thing. And then how does that help us manage the water situation, as one example? So I think that linkage is vital to the success.
In addition to that, one of the ideas is that it might bring about more transparency. So would there be other solutions to maybe making the board a little bit more accountable in certain instances?
I think transparency and accountable are two terms that we shouldn't interact. I would challenge anybody to tell us what they mean by transparency that we're not doing. Right? Everything in local government that can be is online. Because if it isn't, we're getting FOI'd about it, and it's going to get online anyway. So we just like I publish my monthly calendar of everybody I meet with. I publish my expenses every month. Actually, all directors do it in Metro and in POCO anyways. All of our agendas are online. Like frankly, in POCO, we had too much stuff online. We had to take some of it down because nobody was reading and it was getting clogged and you couldn't find what most people were actually looking for. So I think, and we all have open data, about being accountable, now that's a different conversation. So that's about the amalgamation or about directly elected. I hope that by us raising the importance of Metro Vancouver over the last number of years, that people will, when they're electing their mayor, because usually it's the mayor in most cities that sits on the board, will also be thinking about what they're going to do for them when they sit on the board as well.
To that point, too, thinking regionally, the Board of Trade has done a lot of work on that. I think that's been a regional and provincial conversation to a large extent. When it comes to our competitiveness, what role do you think Metro Vancouver can play? And maybe you can talk a bit about the Regional Prosperity Initiative as well.
Thanks. So yeah, the Regional Prosperity Initiative is a big piece of work, like I mentioned in my speech, but we have local governments sitting around the table. We have boards of trades and economic commissions. We have the Board of Trade, the Chamber of Commerce, the port. But you know what? We also have labor there, and we have universities there. and we have some other nonprofits there. They all participate in the regional prosperity and regional economic development. And I think that's what's going to be different about this. And so we've been doing this for a couple of years now. I sometimes push way too hard as I look at some of our Metro staff, but I now have a clock. So I think this is such an important piece of work, and we have I think really good board support at Metro Vancouver. We got everybody kind of swimming in the same direction, that we really need to get this across the finish line before summer. And so we hired McKinsey to write the business case with us, which many people in this room, thank you, participated in and gave thoughts about. We're working on what the governance model looks like. We have meetings with all the economic development officers in the region, with the board. It's all right there, and I think we're really close to pushing it off the shores from Metro Vancouver as a regional district, who's been the champion in owning it, into the society for the community to own it. And I think it's a real game changer for this region. And we didn't work hard, but we were very cognizant that we kept regional prosperity as the top title for it. Even though a lot of it's going to be about economic development and cooperating together to get foreign direct investment and that sort of thing, because we see Edmonton and Calgary and Montreal and Toronto doing that, so we need to work together and not in silos. But we wanted to ensure that prosperity was a part of it, because when you bring that diverse group around the table, why not try to tackle other issues at the same time?
Is amalgamation on the table to help breaking down some of those silos? And I'm looking at this top question here. Why not consider amalgamating municipalities to remove some of the barriers to solutions that you talk about and enhance the level of regional collaboration?
I'm straight up, I'm not a big fan of amalgamation. You maybe could argue in a couple smaller senses that maybe it makes a little bit of sense for the smaller municipality to get into a bigger one for economies of scale. But, Richard and Mike are here. People always talk about the Tri-Cities should maybe be amalgamated. But, if you took all of our budgets together, our budgets would probably be about $250 million, maybe closer to $300 million. Sure, you'd have some less politicians. Maybe that's a good thing. You'd have a few less, executives, a few. You wouldn't cut anything of your core services. We're not going to close a pool or a fire hall or a police department or the water department or the sewer department. That's like 90% of our budget. So to think that it's going to save money, and frankly, we work together quite well. And I love that there is somewhat of a friendly competition. I want to be a better city than Port Moody and Coquitlam. Well, yeah, thanks. But I don't do it in spite of Coquitlam. But I don't do it in spite of Coquitlam. I don't do it and take advantage of Coquitlam to make us better. I do it because it's a friendly competition. And I think with Richard, Mike, and I, you guys have seen us travel across the country and do some crazy stuff. So, but I also appreciate that there's other discussions there. If you look at amalgamation in Ontario, it wasn't more efficient, it didn't create better decisions, and it didn't create a cheaper property tax base. When they look 10 years back of the mega amalgamations. Not just Toronto, all of them. So anecdotally, it kind of feels good, but there's no evidence that it actually works.
You mentioned in your keynote some of the work Metro Vancouver has done around social and affordable housing. What additional role do you think Metro Vancouver could play on what is a very complex and regional issue?
Yeah, I talked about what we're doing, hands on the ground of what we're doing. And we did do the homelessness strategy, so that was more of a policy type work. And I think that's the role that Metro can continue to play is, we see, we're in this really, it seems fast-paced to a certain extent. You got the feds came out with a national housing strategy and lots of money to go with it. You got the provincial government coming out with their strategy and lots of money. And you got Metro that plays this interesting role. So I think there's a lot of people with a lot to say on this right now, and all very good intentions. So I think part of the role of Metro Vancouver, we need to do more density in our own sites, because that's a key role, and Mike's doing a great job heading that up. But we also need to, I think, be a collaborator with others. to help them do that. So in Port Coquitlam, I don't want our city to be a housing provider. That's not our job. We have no competency in it, nothing. But if I had a piece of land, I would want to reach out to Metro Vancouver Housing Corp and say, I'll give the land, let's go get some provincial federal money, and will you operate it? I think that's a winning model for us as local government.
This top question here touches on the idea of affordability as well. What can Metro Vancouver do about economic development, specifically economic activity that raises incomes to address and close the gap on affordability?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, and I keep looking at Evie because she's part of our steering group at the Regional Prosperity Initiative, because we've had that conversation, and we also had this conversation. I headed up for the Union of BC Municipalities, a strategy for affordable housing across British Columbia, and part of that conversation wasn't just about the housing, it was how do we raise the average income up. That's very, very important, and I know the scorecard highlighted that. I know the work that we're doing with McKinsey, when we release our business case, will highlight our GDP per capita, a whole bunch of other things. We need to do a much better job of bringing that end up as well. I don't know if I have the answer, but some of it's regional economic development, but we need to be cognizant that that's part of the solution going forward.
Of course. You mentioned too the climate strategy in a discussion paper that Metro Vancouver has put forward, Climate 2050, and an 80% reduction in emissions. Give us a sense of what you think is going to be required in terms of collaboration and working together to achieve that goal.
Yeah, I think too often we come out with, I said in the silver bullet, if we just do this, or, autonomous vehicles, electric cars, blah, that's all going to be the solution. But I think it's going to be, that sort of saying that many hands make light work, or whatever it is. I get my sayings all wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. I think that's going to be the solution. I think each one of us has a role to play, and we all do not just a little bit, but a little bit leads to more, we get the return on investment. We see that there's actually a business case in some cases to be more environmentally friendly and that sort of thing. I think that's going to help us make those decisions.
What are you most proud of during your term as chair of Metro Vancouver?
For me, I'm most proud of the governance at Metro Vancouver. As I said, we're a 40-person board. I'm really proud of how well we work together. I'm really proud that we tackle really hard issues and we debate vigorously, and then we move on to the next issue, and it might be unanimous, and nobody's holding grudges. And if you think about, even with what we just went through with the remuneration, with the exception of one person, there wasn't a lot of debate about the board. And so let's park that one issue. I challenge anybody to come up with a story in the last, 6, 7 years about the dysfunction of the Metro Vancouver board. There just hasn't been, and that's I would give the same answer over the city of Port Coquitlam. So I'm really proud of that. When I got first elected, or when I was first as mayor, I went to a session on newly elected session, and one of the longer serving mayors, not in Metro Vancouver, from the island, said, "Don't expect that you're going to have friends with anybody you work with after this." Man, that's really sad. So I'm really thankful that I have a whole bunch of new friends. And that might sound kind of hokey, but I know I could phone up Richard and talk to him about pretty much anything. Personal stuff, private stuff, and I know we've had those conversations. And I think that's really, I'm really proud of that, and I think it's really special.
Is there anything you think can be done to enhance that level of cooperation?
I don't know. We'll find out next year. Hopefully whoever comes in after me sees the success that we as this board were able to do and builds on top of it. So I've given it everything I have, so I'm not sure. I think if I answered that, then I'd be like, man, I kind of failed a little bit, which there's always things you can learn, but I hope that someone builds on that. And
one last final closing question. What's next for Greg Moore post-October?
So, yeah, thanks. I get asked that question quite a bit. So just to be clear, there's no politics in my future. Because I always get asked, well, what about provincial and federal? I think it would be extremely hard. I joke, but there's a lot of truth to this. I love that I have a party of two, Erin and I, my wife and I, that she has been my biggest partner, my biggest fan. You know, she texts me just before, as Robin's given the intro. I get a text from her wishing me well. So I love that I have that. I'm not sure, and I am so thankful for people like Ian and Patty that served in party politics, that went to Victoria for work or go to Ottawa for work. I'm so thankful for they do that. I don't think I could, I don't know how you did it. I will tell one quick story because we have 44 seconds. Ian first got elected, never been elected to, you know, student president or something like that, but first elected to public office. Correct me if, well, don't correct me if I'm wrong because my story's good. That's true. But I suspect you'll be here later. So Ian first gets elected, and I'd known Ian before through the tech industry and all that sort of stuff, and where did this guy come from, and got elected on a strong mandate in Port Moody. And we had a homelessness session or something in Coquitlam City Hall. And Ian's literally been on the job for a couple weeks. He comes in, little wrinkled, he's carrying his suitcase, you remember this? Carrying his suitcase because he didn't understand the travel thing and how to leave stuff in different places, and he's a little flustered, he didn't know what day it was, and it was awesome. But I remember that as, yeah, you got much better at it over time. So anyways, I'm getting off topic, but so no provincial politics or federal politics, because a party of two is brilliant. But you know, to be straight up, I think I'll do my own thing. You know, I was a city planner before I did this. I think I have some pretty good experience in local government, in understanding provincial and federal government, and understanding how all of these systems works and who's who in the zoo. I think you put those two things together, and I think it's a pretty good combination. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.